Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I am Hasan Comert from Trinity College. And first of all, I would like to thank you all, and especially I want to thank Jayati and Chandru for organizing this very timely and important event. So today I will be talking about that sustainability framework of the IMF. And this is a joint work with Güney Düzçay from Turkish Central Bank and Sabri Öncü. And I will not repeat everything that was said yesterday. We know that developing countries have been going through very difficult times, and developing countries have been facing with real and serious debt issues. And here my emphasis will be on the IMF role in this process. Whenever developing countries experience, debt problems, the role of IMF increases in developing countries. And in fact, many developing countries have started negotiating with the IMF. Some of them reached some agreements with them. So that sustainability framework enters into picture here because of the fact that sustainability framework plays very important role. They are analytical tools to justify and determine the paths and targets of the IMF programs. And given developing countries' situation in terms of debt-related problems, and given the importance of that sustainability framework, I feel that it is important and crucial to understand the underlying assumptions and the implications of that sustainability framework. So today, the paper is long, and then we have elaboration, a detailed analysis of that sustainability framework. But today, I would love to focus on the issues and problems regarding the frameworks. And if time permits, I will talk about some policy implications. So first of all, that sustainability framework started with 2002 IMF report. Anne Kruger was the main person behind this initiative. And then they have evolved throughout times. So these frameworks have evolved throughout time. In fact, there are two frameworks. The first one is called market access countries, that sustainability framework, and it is it's based on the original one, and later on the IMF in relation to World Bank developed low-income countries, that sustainability framework. They have evolved throughout time. In fact, they are still evolving, and there are different phases of revisions of this process, these frameworks. But overall, so yes, these frameworks have evolved significantly throughout time, and then they are very complex. And then I will just highlight a couple of important things about them. They are basically based on similar concepts and elements of similar frameworks. And the solvency condition is important for them. And then the projected adjustment path should be politically, economically, and socially feasible for these frameworks. And they are mainly medium-term projections, but at the same time, low-income countries' framework is mostly about long-terms as well. When it comes to main differences, basically, market access countries' framework is utilizing public debt, and it doesn't distinguish between external and domestic public debt, whereas low-income countries, that sustainability framework is focusing on publicly guaranteed external debt. And especially, as I told you, low-income countries' framework is interested in long-term projections for developmental purposes. And this framework has explicit threshold, whereas market access countries' framework has individualized thresholds. As a result of that you cannot basically have a single threshold for market access countries, that sustainability framework. So I would love to directly went into the heart of the matter, and I would love to discuss the main issues with this framework. If you are interested in details of this framework, there is a large section in the paper. You can take a look at that one. So I will highlight 5 important issues with this framework. First, there are foundational related problems. I will elaborate on this. And second, there is significant issues regarding the conducting this, and then that will be also elaborated. And these are high-stake decisions under biased accuracy, and there are a lot of over-optimism in these projections. And at the same time, that sustainability frameworks are stock flow inconsistent, and especially when you look at the overall picture, the IMF, as Jayati yesterday and many others highlighted, these frameworks ignores the structural factors behind that accumulation. So overall, when we look at these frameworks in detail, for good or for bad, they are complex, but their main inputs are coming from house models and judgments. So in this sense, it is almost impossible to replicate that sustainability analysis, because we don't know how basic growth projections are produced. We don't know how interest rates are produced, and they are mostly basically based on in-house models or judgments, and even these judgments can change from stuff to stuff. As a result of this, even though these models have been made very, very complex, it is not clear whether this complexity will allow us to replicate or to allow us to give them credibility, because we don't know how the system really, how these outputs are generated. And then, by definition, that sustainability frameworks are justifying primary balance. As a result of this, basically, these frameworks foundationally suggest budget cuts and at the same time tight budget policies, because as we will discuss in the stock flow consistent part, the whole framework is based on that equation, and then inputs are derived from house models, in-house models, and some other judgments. And as a result of this, that sustainability projections are made throughout using this that equation. But overall, the whole system is driven by public balance in that equation. As a result of this, by definition, they are used to justify fiscal austerity. These are mission impossible, more or less, because of the fact that they are forward-looking projections, but at the same time, when we look at what is happening over there, it is the fact that basically the IMF is assuming the future is at least stochastically known. As a result of this, overall their projections are assuming that we know what's going to happen in the future, and then we know how much we should put emphasis on the austerity. And then at the same time, there are excess complexity in these models. As a result of this, this is hindering consensus even among IMF staff. At the same time, when we look at this whole framework, the central role of the total public debt in market access countries framework is preventing, I guess, researchers from understanding the true nature of this debt issues. Because in many cases, as Chandru and many others suggested, it is external debt rather than public debt. So it is external debt the main problem. So at the same time, there is an arbitrary distinction between low-income countries and market access countries, because, for example, Sri Lanka with per capita GDP over $3,000 under market access countries framework, whereas Ghana is treated under low-income countries framework. So, as I highlighted, many researchers have shown that these frameworks are generating very, very optimistic growth projections. As a result of this, basically, they are paving way to ambitious fiscal targets. Because when you are overestimating growth, and basically when you are underestimating the implications of tight fiscal policy, it will be very easy to justify tight fiscal policies. As a result of this, these frameworks are geared towards, again, ambitious fiscal targets. And when it comes to these successful projections, in many cases there are over-optimisms, and these over-optimisms have been reported by many researchers. But when we try to understand those success cases are related to mainly either some positive external developments or some, some basically harsher policies or harsher public expenditure cuts. And then these projection errors, when you look at why they are over-optimistic, yes, there are projection errors, and these projections errors are not related to public balance related. They are related to either real exchange rate growth or stock flow adjustment. As a result of this, basically, they are focusing on the wrong component of the debt equation, because the main driver of the debt is not public debt, that is related to other parts of the equation. So I'm not sure whether current refinements have improved the performance of these frameworks, because when we look at the current assessments, according to current assessments, IMF's frameworks have been still overestimating and over-optimistic about growth and about the implications of these programs. So why are they over-optimistic? I guess this is related to the fact that incentive structures are wrong. First, the IMF staff is operating at an institution in which there has been a traditional, way of thinking, and, prudent fiscal policies have been always supported. As a result of this, it is not that easy to go against this consensus. B, when you look at the whole framework, by definition, the IMF staff has to defend and promote a strategy as viable and feasible, and even if it contains optimistic elements. Imagine a situation in which the IMF staff is trying to propose a program, and that program requires that sustainability framework. And that sustainability framework basically shows that that program will enable solvency and it will be feasible. As a result of this, among all other paths, they need to choose the one which is basically more or less optimistic or more or less justifying that program. There's no way that they can choose another one if that is showing that that program is not sustainable. And when you look at the whole equation, as I highlighted before, this equation, that's equation which is driving the whole assessment stock flow inconsistent. For example, this is basically IMF 2022, and all projections are based on this very simple equation, though they are, they are using much more, manipulated versions, and then, you can basically obtain the real one, and you can also obtain the one relative to GDP. But overall, this is what they use. Changing that relative to GDP is equal to the previous year's debt, and then we have IT interest rate and YT, that's growth, and then public balance is playing the central role, and stock flow adjustment part is generally ignored. So when you look at the overall picture, but the empirical work shows that other parts of this equation is driving the debt. And then, for example, this table, and we also replicated similar tables and similar studies in our study, showing the composition of average annual changes in debt stock in 92 emerging and 58 low-income economies. As you see, that yellow bars and then blue bars are the main drivers of the change in debt, rather than the red one, which is basic primary balance. So primary balance is basically next to nothing when you look at the overall picture. Okay, so I have about 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, I will summarize some basic big issues related to IMF framework. So as highlighted by Jayati and many others yesterday, IMF is failing distinguishing between domestic and international public debt within the market access countries especially. The framework is putting too much emphasis on overall public debt, and then in fact this overall public debt is also linked to saving. So when you look at the IMF framework, inflows of foreign aid and all those financial flows are substitute for domestic savings. So the whole framework is working towards basically financial flows or debt is coming because the developing countries don't have enough savings, and then if they don't have enough savings, they cannot generate enough credit according to this framework to finance investment. And as a result of this, basically, the whole idea is to improve savings in developing countries. At least it has been the case, although there are some researchers which have been much more aware of the difference between saving and finance. But the whole edifice is more or less based on neoclassical growth model and the loanable funds theory of interest rate. As a result of this, the whole idea is developing countries are suffering from low savings, and then to be able to solve this problem, developing countries need to cut their budgets, and these budget cuts are also used as a means to pay debt. So here there are two problems, fundamental problems. A, there's a big confusion between savings and confusion. B, there's a big confusion between public surplus and then the basically source to pay external debt. Because as Chandru suggested, basically external debt cannot be paid by public surpluses by developing countries, because developing countries cannot pay their debt in terms of their currencies. Overall, I will just stop here with the last thing. External borrowing is intrinsically linked to the hierarchy of money in this framework and the original sin. In fact, the developments in the center influence the cost and conditions of borrowings, and the credit creation capacity of developing countries is significantly constrained by the overall world international financial system. As a result of this, from this perspective, borrowing is the fallout or the outcome of the asymmetric international financial system. Thanks a lot.